had some time, so I drove by my old house where John and I lived, and then later Matt and I lived for a time. And I wanted to look at the tree we planted, because we planted a tree soon after Grant was born. And I took a picture of it, but it conjured up some feelings and some thoughts. And so I started to write this post for my thankful post, which I do every day.
Right.
I started to do it yesterday, and then I decided it's not the right time, and I just copied and pasted it and kind of tucked it away because I felt like there was more to it. I didn't quite know how. I knew that there was something in me that I wanted to say and verbalize, but I didn't quite know how to do it, and I just put it on the back burner. But I started out by saying this. Every day it's, I'm thankful for the gift of, and this day it's the gift of remembrance. Remembrance, it means the act of remembering, a holding in mind or bringing to mind, a recollection. I had some time the other day, so I drove by the old house where my older kids grew up, and Grant until he was 3. I wanted to check on the tree we planted in the front yard soon after Grant was born. The big, beautiful tree that used to be there blew over during the monsoon. The tree doesn't look so good, but maybe it's just because it's winter. I'll have to go back and check on it in a couple of months. The neighborhood has kind of gone downhill, which is what we were afraid of, but there are still a few houses that have been kept up well. Ours being one of them. It's funny how I refer to the house as ours. It's not mine or ours anymore. But at one time it was. So many things to remember about my time, our time in that house. So many good things centered around family, friends, love, and laughter. And so many not so good things centered around sadness, loss, and pain. And the thought that came to me, is that even though all of that happened in that house, I asked myself the question, would I change anything? Would I take it back if we didn't have to go through the pain and the loss? And then I said to myself, no, because then we wouldn't have the good things either. All of the good memories and all of the things that happened in that house. I mean, we used to host, a young married small group. And to this day, I get, comments from the different people that came into our home and how we nurtured them and counseled them. And there was just such life there, and how that has helped them in their own walk or in their own marriage or their own lives. And so even though, marriage ended, there was so much good that came out of it. In the times with our family and our kids, and we built a pool, and my kids would have their friends over and go swimming, or we would, in the summertime, I videotaped, the kids would put together a play. The neighborhood kids would come over and do a play, and we would videotape. I still have it on videotape, and they comment about that, and just, so many fun, good memories that, there were some really heartbreaking ones too, painful ones. But you can't have I'm learning that life is both, and that if you don't want the pain, then you sacrifice the good. And so, anyways, just trying to put that in words that we can either allow the memories of the past to either make us a victim, cripple us, keep us stuck.
Hold you hostage.
That's a good way to put it. Or we can see how it all is used for good, just like the word says. God can use all things together for good to those who love God and are called according to his word and to his purpose. And I feel like that has been the reason, behind, or how I can say, not that he caused it, but what good can come out of it and how nothing is wasted.
So it's so funny because, like, in prayer about all of this and saying, okay, so Rhonda's going to come over. It's so weird, God, that this is who you're bringing first, because I don't know how to word it, but like this was on the lower end of the totem pole of the topics that I wanted to record, right? The original topic, what my plan was when Connie starts planning it. And then God's like, oh, that's what you thought. And so anyways, while I've been in prayer about us and just the conversation about it and all that other stuff, because the heart of me about the whole thing for this podcast, and this is what I said to God, and I said it to my counselor and all that stuff, is even if it's just for me, like a therapy for me, then that's really fine. But if it goes out anywhere to anyone, that it would be edifying, that it would speak truth, that it would speak life into people, and that all glory would go to God. And so I'm like, as long as it's that, I don't care what you do with it. Like, I mean, look at me. I clearly have no ideas of becoming famous, right? Like, I mean, that's not even my plan anyways. But anyway, so I was praying about it, and all of a sudden I remembered the very first time I ever met you. Do you remember the first time I met you?
No, you have to refresh my memory.
So we were in, I think Michael was maybe 8 months old, so he's turning 23. We were in leadership training with Brian. I remember going around the room. Brian was going around the room, and he was talking about whatever the homework was about forgiveness type of thing and all that stuff. And so I started talking, and I was probably the youngest person in there because I was only like 21. Mm-hmm. And Brian said a question, and I was like, mine isn't for anybody here on earth or something like that as far as forgiveness and what I was walking through. And Brian laughed and was like, and everybody else just kind of looked at me like, she doesn't belong here type thing. And I'm like, it's not even about forgiving humans. It's about forgiving God. But who am I to forgive God? Like, and really going through this battle. And he was like, so explain more of that or whatever. And it was just the whole thing. He took my kid. So this was like 3 years. And that was what I used to say. He took her from me. Mm-hmm. And now I don't feel that way at all. But anyways, I remember going through that emotion. But you sat up and you had your back pressed against those metal chairs, and you just started crying, and you said no words while I was talking. And I was like, who is she? But I just remember this. And then we didn't really have anything to do with each other again or see each other. Like, I could see you at church and stuff, but not until Healing the Wounded Woman. And so God just started reminding me of all of the stuff of while we were in Healing the Wounded Woman and things that you said when you were leading it and how I accidentally got in there. I don't know if you even remember how I accidentally got in. My grandma signed me up all of a sudden and threw me in there like a day or two before it started. And then how I got you, I don't even know, other than you were explaining that you and the other leaders like laid everybody out on the floor, prayed about it, and then just kind of separated them out kind of stuff. And so I got you. And I can remember listening to you talking about all the stuff that you went through when you were going through the divorce and stuff and how you found out that the divorce was even going to happen and all that stuff. And then later in my life, when I was going through my divorce, I feel like I mirrored what you spoke all those years earlier. I mean, I can remember being in the tub for 6 months straight. I don't even know how many times a day I would take a bath with the water running just so I could bawl. And I would pray. I would pray that God would somehow save this marriage and restore it. But I knew, like, I didn't know why we were getting divorced fully, but I knew the divorce was happening. And then I'd be so upset and hurt and all these things that I would literally sit there and pray that let him die in a car accident so I don't have to make this decision and hurt my kids. So that I don't have to be the one that does this, right? And then you feel horribly guilty and you have to walk through repentance of that in the same breath because you're like, this is the father for my kids. I would never want that for my children. And then it'd be like, okay, God, then just take me. Like, I'm ready. Just take me. I'm not ready. Like, you know, you just go through these emotions for 30 minutes, 45 minutes in a tub, just weeping. I ended up doing it for 3 years. And it's because I was scared. I didn't want to make that call. And then finally, by accident, I came across this redemptive divorce book. And that was what saved my life. And that was what allowed me to say enough. And then after the divorce papers were done was when he started confessing stuff. But anyways, needless to say, I totally felt like I could remember. And everything that we talked about in that class, even though it was so many years earlier.
Came back to you.
Came back. Came back. And so anyways, so the last day and a half or more actually of really praying about it and the fact that you were coming in, God just started reminding me of stuff of how you and I met and the commonalities of what you and I have. And the one thing that I know is you and I have survived some heartbreak. But I think of the greatest compliment I've ever been given in my whole life is that while Reed was in surgery that first night, that they didn't want to disturb me because I was in worship. So I said, okay, God, so if that's what you want me to show, the heart of me of who I am, then let's do it. Let's go. And for whatever reason, he kept reminding me of you being with me in certain things and being like, okay, so there's something, the commonality that you and I mirror in each other, which is survivalship. And I think it's being in worship and pain. And so I think that's what we're supposed to talk about. I don't know why, because I literally have these notes for being a patient advocate in your job and all that stuff. But I've been being pulled over here and like literally my gut was in just like anxiety over it. So,
well, it's interesting because I'm in my mind also I'm trying to think, okay, 23 years ago, what would I have been crying about in the leadership class, you know, or what would have brought tears to my eyes? You know, was it me just empathizing with you. Could have been. I think I had known a little bit of your story just because I had known your grandma, you know, and been worked with your grandma in women's ministry stuff. So I had already known a little bit, and that my heart just broke from a mother's standpoint, you know, being able to what you would be feeling. But I do know that, you know, it blesses me that to hear you say like things that you got out of the class, or things that maybe I said that you could relate to, that later you were to draw upon for strength or wisdom. I mean, that's a blessing to me, because it makes me know, I mean, because if I don't remember it, don't be offended, because I'm okay with that, because that makes me know then that it was less me and more God.
Right.
And so, you know, at first I'd be like, oh gosh, I wish I could remember that. But then I let that go, because, okay, that's not about me. It's about God. God spoke to you through me. I was just a vessel. God spoke to you and taught you things, or gave you tools through going through the study of healing the wounded woman.
Right.
That it prepared you for what was coming. And I think that's the God that we serve. And for that, I am grateful, you know, because, like I was saying to you earlier, you know, as I was preparing for this, I'm preparing to talk about why I got into nursing. And I think even at a young age, God prepares us for things that we don't even know we're going to be affected by until later in our lives. But, you know, I, as a young girl, wanted to be a nurse, like I was telling you earlier. But I even have a little picture my mom found when I was 9, a little report I did that I got A- on, because I misspelled a word. But it was a picture of me as a nurse, Nurse Beachy, and why I wanted to be a nurse and to help people and all that. But then when I got older, all I wanted to do was be a wife and a mother. And so I got married at the ripe old age of 19. And when my husband decided, you know, we weren't having any more kids, and I had to grieve that because I wanted more kids, I realized by the time I'm 42, I'm going to be done raising kids. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And just read an article about the nursing shortage coming and pending, and, you know, years later. And so I just felt God pulling me in that direction and stirring that in me. And I just felt like this is what God was wanting me to do. But I had to lay down a lot of things that were women's ministry and being involved in my kids' school. In order to do this, it was going to take some sacrifice. And after being, you know, getting all my prereqs out of the way and being in nursing school, it was my first block of nursing school, or going into my first block of nursing school, I just cried out to the Lord. I'm like, this is hard. If this is what you want me to do, shouldn't it be easy? Shouldn't it be
We
joyful?
do think that way, don't we?
Yeah. Did I miss something? And did I really hear from you? And I just remember, and just like he has done before, and it's funny that you talk about being in the tub, because I probably shared that with you guys there's times where God has spoken to me and I'm in the tub or I'm in the bathroom, and I ask him if he'll show me. I want also clarification. Well, this wasn't a bathtub. I was in my bedroom though, and I had my Bible open. It's like, God, this is hard. I'm not enjoying this. I mean, when I was back doing women's ministry and I was home, you know, going to helping out in the kids' classroom, that brought you glory. How does this bring you glory?
Right.
You know? And I need to know that I heard from you and that I'm not off base here. And I just had my Bible open and I had my eyes closed and my hands in worship. If I was worshiping, I need to hear from you. I opened my eyes and I looked down, and this chapter, verses were highlighted. It was Isaiah 43:18 and 19. And it said, forget the former ways, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? Like a spring that wells up. You know, making a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland. And instantly in that moment, all the fear, all the doubt, everything was gone. Yeah. Because I heard from God. Yeah. And I could say, okay, you know, that is, I don't need to know, and I just need to be obedient. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, or we allow Satan to discourage us, or fear, or whatever, and we stop doing maybe what God has placed on our hearts because of fear, of doubt, of second guessing ourselves or whatever. And if we stop and allow ourselves, and it's worship in prayer, listening to reading the word, listening to music, just in your time with God, just worshiping with him, that if we will allow ourselves to sit and be still, or to be, and if we hear from God, then step out and be obedient. Because it was 6 months later that John came to me and said, I don't love you anymore. I haven't loved you since the first year of our marriage, and I don't want to be married. And it's nothing you've done. You've been a good wife, but I don't want to look back on the rest of my life and regret it, and I just don't want to be married. And it rocked my world. But the thing that I held on to is, God, you knew this was coming. You provided for me even before I knew that I had a need. Because going to school is what got me up in the morning. It's something I could pour myself into. And then when it was all said and done, I had a career that I could fall back on, and a career that fits my giftings and my talents and the things that he has built in me and create the way he's created me, that it goes very well with this profession. And so it's those kind of things. If I go back to what I said earlier, now this is kind of tying in remembrance. I call them rocks of remembrance, because throughout the Old Testament, when something would happen, they would build an altar to remember what God did in this place. So I call those experiences my rocks of remembrance. That was one of them. Because the next time that I'm faced with a challenge or a difficulty or something, I can pull from, God was faithful here. God spoke to me here. God did something here. I know that he can do something again in this situation. I know that he is, can make a way where there doesn't seem to be a way. I know that he will provide for me in this situation, just like he did back then.
Yeah.
It's faith-building rocks of remembrance that I can recall.
He has such a way about him. And this is one of the things that I was talking about in small group. And I talked about while Reed was in the hospital, and just that I really just wish that people could hear, which is we make the relationship with God so simple and yet so difficult all at the same time. And if we fully understood just how, I think about as far as with my kids, yes, they do something wrong, there's a consequence, right? You get in trouble, grounded, whatever kind of stuff. But as a parent, we're not literally walking around waiting and watching our children so that we could trip them, right? But a lot of people, especially if you were like me, raised in old school ways of the wrath of God versus the love of God, and that's the God that I was taught about, just because of the way I was raised in manipulation of things, right? Was always, everything was about the wrath. And I think that's why it was so difficult for me to really understand him fully in who he was to me, because I was raised in the fear of God versus the love of God. And there's so many people I know that are out there, because they're when something bad does happen, they're well, God failed me. Versus leaning into him and really understanding what leaning into him is. And I sit here and think of all of the different things, and I'm you really do have a sense of humor, God, definitely, because if I look back on things, I just go, whoa. But I can remember I was 11 years old when the first time that I fully understood who God was in my heart. And it was my friend and we had just gotten new Cabbage Patch Velcro shoes. So we wanted to go for a walk in the neighborhood. And where I lived on the street, behind the house was a park, down the way, right? And so she and I start walking. We're walking to the end of the street, and all of a sudden she gets scared and she wants to go back to my house. And I'm and she was about a year younger than me, I believe. And I'm what is the problem? Why? Kind of stuff. And she's oh my gosh, what if stranger danger pulls up in a van? Because at this time, pizza delivery people were not really pizza delivery people. It was just, 80s, come on. You know what I mean? Yeah. So anyway, so she starts freaking out about stuff, and she's I want to just go back. I want to go back. And she's you're not scared? And I'm I just want to get to the park. But she's you're not scared? And I said, no. She's what if stranger danger shows up and tries to put us in the van? And I said, well, I'll just say, get behind me, Satan. You don't belong here. And I'm just going to the park. And I shocked myself with such a simple but bold answer. Because I had to have clearly, at 11 years old, I heard somebody say that statement. But it resonated something in my spirit that I was yeah, doesn't mean bad things don't happen. And even at 11, I understood the depth of something bad can happen, but I also know who my Savior is. I knew it at 11. And so then as I was going through the other things that would come up in life, and especially Christy's death, I did get angry at God when she died. And I can remember feeling he knew I was going to get mad, and he was okay with it. Give it to him. Best shot I had, give it to him. And so I did. I was angry. And there's been, when I went through the divorce, and not even so much the divorce, it was because of what the church did, that I decided God and I are cool, but the people in his church, I can't. Just can't. Because my kids and I were not treated well. And so anyways, funny enough, God picked me up and placed me in the center with the same type of thing, this whole job thing, that it was really for a hobby, because I was a stay-at-home mom. Okay, so what am I getting into real estate for? It was something to do while the kids were in school. And I mean, I didn't do a lot of it, like 7 transactions a year kind of thing. I was very, very limited on what I could do, you know? So anyways, but that was what sustained me when I suddenly was single and had to have income. Luckily, I had this fallback of real estate license.
Right.
And it wasn't to sell homes. It was, I got into prop management first. And then I ended up being placed within a year, right after Reed and I got married, onto this team full of believers from church. And he totally knew what he was doing. So like David Quaid was on that group. He's now my small group leader. But he's been, him and his wife, Nikki, they've been people that like Reed and I've used for accountability on so many things and just prayer and things like that. And then it ended up being during this last year. Holy cow, you know what I mean? But anyway, so in the midst of I don't like God and his people, or I mean, I love God, not his people. He places me on this team.
With his people.
Who, for the most part, all of them, like just accepted me where I was, would remind me of things, but never like gave me crap because I wasn't in church, right? And just loved me where I was instead. And so then Reed and I became members of Elevation online because it was at an arm's length, you know, so it was safe. Like we were involved, but you can't hurt me from here kind of thing. And then, you know, his situation happened. But Reed's hospital, the second hospital where he was, every day once I started coming home, like literally, that used to be, if you remember, Phoenix Children's used to be there. Before they had their big, beautiful campus. That's where Christy was rushed. They air evac'd her there to the same hospital Reed was air evac to. Now his was a transport, not an air evac emergency. But anyways, the old emergency room entrance is right there on McDowell. You turn in before you get the light at 12th Street. They now have those big barriers blocking it, but that ramp going up to the emergency room is still there. And I can remember being in the back of that police car, rushing up there with my mom in the back seat. And I was cussing at the police officer when he first picked us up because yes, he was driving fast, but I'm like, I'm in a cop car and my daughter fell in a pool, like lights and sirens, buddy. Come on, you know? And then while we were en route though, we were going to a different hospital. While we were en route, he got the call that she was taken there. And so he was reassuring us on our ride, that's good. They have so much stuff there and da-da-da. Like that's the best place for her to go. So I arrived hopeful and I can remember that whole situation. And so anyways, every time that I've ever passed on the freeway, because I've never driven down McDowell again since Christy died, leaving that hospital that day. But I would pass on the freeway, right? You can see the back of it. And I've always looked at it and I've said, that's where Christy died. I've told Reed and all of that when we would leave or drive by, anybody that was with me, I'd say, oh, that's where my daughter died. That's all the identifying marker I ever gave it. And so every day, as Reed's living there, and I'm driving down McDowell now, and I have to pass and acknowledge that ramp that I took, he literally was taking me through some stuff. And now I look at the hospital, and it's just so crazy when you think about it. So when we have visitors come into town and all that stuff, whenever we're driving on 10, I look at it all the time and I'm like, look, there's Reed's hospital. Like, so he healed that old thing of, so I lost Christy here, but he started something in 1994 in me that had to walk and work out all the way through until 2019. But because of going through the loss of her, I can remember walking through the hospital with Michael the day of, and holding his hand. And I said, Michael, promise me, if anybody tries to take me to a room by myself, don't let me go alone. Don't let me go alone. And so because he let me go through that all those years ago, when I'm 18 years old, and I can remember in my spirit in that moment, I was so angry at God. Like, how could you do this to me? How could you do this to me? And I remember also though, because I was sitting here trying to hug something that couldn't hug me back. Everybody else is getting comforted and I have no comfort. And I just kept saying, as long as there's breath in my body, as long as there's breath in my body, I got to get through the next breath. And I knew I just had to get through the next breath. And it's so funny because that was when I was 18 and then same hospital, all these years later, it is literally the thing that I kept telling myself, and is I would have to do that walk-in because now the walk-in is so freaking long because you got to go through. I mean, it was like an eternal walk. And I literally do not know on some days how I could walk those halls to get all the way to where Reed was in that new wing up on the 7th floor. And my knees would shake. And one foot in front of the other. And I just kept going, God, as long as there is breath in my body, like you're not done here. You're not done here. You're not done here. And I would just have to hold on to it and believe it. But can I just tell you, and I've said this to so many people, I've never felt closer to him. And there are times that's what I miss about those days. Like, I don't want to go back and relive it by any means. And at the same time, I miss how close he and I were. And that just feeling of around me at all times.
It reminds me of that song, My Soul Longs for the Presence of the Living God. And I think we, when deep cries to deep, and God meets us. He's always there. But when we long for the presence of the living God, and he meets us and he touches us, and there is just something about that nothing else compares. And in our daily lives, so often things we get between work and life happens, and we get so distracted, and we have so many things that demand our time, that there's not that daily longing for the presence of the living God. And so I hear you. I mean, there's times where I'm not going through that. Just like the other day, it's like, I need more time with you, God. I need more time with you.
Yeah, you miss it. Like, I can feel like it's the same thing of like when Reed and I were first dating kind of thing. And I would have to go home. Yeah. Because it's night and he and I didn't get off work till 6:30 at night, and our nights together would end by 8:30 because Reed used to get up at 4:00 in the morning. So he's like, I got to go to bed. And I hated it, man. Because I was like, but I still need to just touch you. You know what I mean? Like, just that you have that, just driving around in the car together where it's like, you've just got to touch them. And I can remember just craving with my fingertips, needing to hold his hand. Like, and I've said the same thing to God where I'm like, I just need that. Like, because it's there, but it's like I've told people, we have to be extremely intentional, especially in our relationship with God, because it's so much by faith. It's not by physical. We don't have him physically seen in front of us, so it's so much by faith where you've got to be like intentional. So I have to intentionally daily get in a place where it's like, okay, God, I'm going to you. I need my time with you. Like, I need it. But like any other relationship, family member, spouse, whatever, you have to nurture that relationship. It is up to us to nurture that relationship with God, because he's not pushy. He will not force himself on you, but he's always there waiting. He's always readily available. And so I have to be very intentional in that, even with worship, because worship was literally what sustained me also during Reed's time, because I didn't eat. I mean, I thank God I had people just pouring worship into me. And then when the 16 days that I was living at the hospital with him, I would literally just put on YouTube, and it had a music loop of all of the different worship songs. And I would just play that because I would have to hear it, because my anxiety and my fears and all that stuff. But I also needed Reed to hear it, because I know that he and God had plenty of conversation in those places. I wish he could remember, but he doesn't. But if God wants him to, I know it'll be revealed. But anyways, I tell people all the time, even in worship, I have to be super intentional, because I cannot ever let it just be words out of my mouth. And so I was telling some friends of ours, because they're like, what do you mean by that? And I said, I see in my mind everything I'm singing. So like, for like your breath in my lungs kind of thing. Like, I have to visually, whatever those words are, I have to visually see it. And I just pour myself fully into it, because the worship I wasn't reading scripture. I mean, yes, people were praying. I was definitely praying, but I wasn't in scripture. I didn't have the ability for that. You know what I mean? It was the worship that was the sustaining. And so that is like so all day long at work, even, that's the greatest thing about working from home.
Worship music on.
I've got worship music on all day long. And that's just my thing. And so every day, and I also don't turn my phone on or off, do not disturb, until 9:00 in the morning. Everybody thinks I'm crazy that I go that long. I have to, because I have to wake up. I have to have coffee. I have to have like something in me before I even can acknowledge anything else. And that's just being real. So like, I know he's there, but we're not having conversations yet. But in all things that I've been through, all of them. And I've gone through a lot. He's never let me down. I've been through a lot, but he's never let me down. And there's other stuff that I've gone through after I got through this. I had good, and then something else happened, but he's never let me down because I've made it through each obstacle.
That's another song.
I've made it through.
Never let me down.
Yeah.
Another worship song.
Did you watch last night the volcano walker guy?
No.
Okay, I was not planning on it, but I was like, this is just insane. Like, literally, how dumb does somebody have to be? This just is the dumbest
Why
thing.
do you do something like this?
So I had to watch it, right? And I literally was like, you're an idiot, is how I'm starting off the show, because I talk out loud all the time. You're an idiot. And then it's his wife does her thing and whatever, because she did stuff. And so anyways, he's getting ready to go. So he goes to his family to pray. And instantly I'm bawling. I am so bawling. And one of the things he said was, and Lord, if something happens during this, may even in the fall glorify you and lead people to who you are.
Is this the same guy that walked across the canyon or
Yes.
whatever? Because he did that. That's the same.
So he's
feeling.
walking the whole thing and he's singing worship songs. Yeah. Reed starts bawling because at one point during it, because he's in awe of walking over the volcano, and he's like, holy cow, like he's just in awe, and he's telling God, your masterpiece, like the things that you thought of to create, and just he's totally glorifying God in it.
Him.
Yes. And then, but he's singing.
To show the majesty of God.
Yeah.
The power
and
of
what's
God.
funny is the volcano that he walked across was named Messiah.
Oh my goodness.
And anyways, but he's singing worship song and he's thanking God. He's in prayer about stuff like, holy cow. And so I started laughing and I'm just weeping. And it wasn't even that he's walking across some volcano like, you're dumb.
Yeah, it changed.
It totally changed me. And I started laughing and I said, God, you're having so much fun with him right now, aren't you? Like every step he took, he made sure that he was giving honor and praise to God. And he did it in such a rad way. And he was overwhelmed with, I remember Reed and I, when we went on our epic road trip that God gave us as a gift prior to Reed's little stunt. We're driving through the Smoky Mountains.
Reed's little stunt.
I don't know. I'll always
That's
refer
so
to it
cute.
as that. But as we're driving through the Smoky Mountains and all that stuff, we're going in I can remember this winding road. And Reed's done this drive before. It's new to me. But Reed's done this drive. And it's just beautiful, breathtaking. And I can remember we came around this one turn. And it's just straight up this mountain just covered in just the most beautiful of green and things, right? And I heard come out of my husband's mouth, and even with all this, you still thought to make me. And I can remember that, and I would hear him say that in the hospital when all things were going on. Like, thank you, God, that in something so simple that you've reminded him that even with all of this that you've created, you still thought to make him. And so then I'm listening to this guy last night, and I'm like, these have got to be the people that God really, really just has a blast with, right? Like, that's like, I mean, this idiot's walking freaking 1,800 feet over a volcano, across a volcano. Like, but...
Proclaiming the name of God the whole
Yeah,
way.
the whole thing. That even if it goes bad. Yeah. And they've lost multiple family members and falls. So that's what I'm watching before, where I was like, even more of an idiot. Like, how? I mean, why? Like, I don't get it. And then I was like, because you've got to do... He knows that he's got to do something that's going to catch people's attention so that he can get out there and use it as his platform to speak and give glory to God.
I don't know. It could be that also God told him to. You know, maybe he's walking in obedience. This is
Right.
what I am going to use. I'm going to use this. You know, I want you to do this so that my
So in
name
all
can
things,
can be lifted up and be glorified.
So when you're given this thing of, I've got to lay down women's ministry and I've got to do this, and like, I know women's ministry is good, God, like, I'm doing your works. And instead he calls you into nursing. Like, nursing, that's not your works, can't be your works, right? Except it is, because in that you have, even if you don't necessarily speak about God to them, you bring the presence of God to them, even in just your being there. And so it stretches out. The borders are without.
Well, and I know, you know, this guy walking over the volcano, the thing that comes to mind is risk. And I think that in a lot of what God calls us to, and again, that's was my challenge to people is, you know, I could have said no to going back to nursing school. And I could have said, even when I was in it and it was hard and I wasn't enjoying it, and it was difficult, I could have just quit. you know. But the risk is stepping out in faith. The risk is doing the hard thing. The risk is being obedient when it doesn't feel like, like this is the right.
Like it's a big deal.
Yeah, or like it's hard and it's not. I don't enjoy it, and I just want to quit, or I'm scared, or So my thing is, we can, and I think God. In the same time, I don't think God's going to turn his back on us if we say no. If we don't risk, if we decide not to. And I tell people that, when I've done Healing the Wounded Woman and, God, or anything, if I talk to people, it's like, yeah, you don't have to walk that, but if you don't, you're going to miss out on something that God has for you. And if you do, it is a risk. But on the other side of that risk is
the reward.
The reward, an opportunity that you would not have experienced, and to see God move and work, not only on your behalf, but in the lives of other people. Isn't that what we're here for? Isn't that what it's about?
That's one of the things of why I had to be like, okay, if podcasts, like, I, honest to God, did not know that normal people could do a podcast. Normal people just being average like me. I honestly thought you had to be famous or rich.
Yeah.
Because that's all I listen to is people that have be able to do a production. And so when he was saying podcast, I was like, are you freaking kidding? Like, why? I mean, YouTube made sense because I can, right? Because everybody's on YouTube, but podcast, like, why a podcast? And who am I to do a podcast and all this other stuff? But then I was reminded of so many people that reached out to me that I don't even know because somebody that they know shared a video, right? And I had people say, I don't know who you are, but I've got a similar story of hurt, right? Or I stopped believing that God even exists years ago because of hurts that they went through and all that. And they've recommitted their life. People that found him because of just what I shared, they were like, well, who the heck is this God? And I tell people all the time, I hate religion. Like, I'm not a person about religion at all. It's not my thing. But I'm all about relationship. Give me a relationship. I don't want religion. I don't want to be caught up in the rules and the regulations of things because that totally minimizes and takes away the effect of the relationship. And God's called us to be in relationship with him. And so, like, yes, in relationship with him, there are things that we get placed convictions or things of obedience that you're not supposed to do, right? Like once you become married, well, hopefully once you become married, you're not having other relationships, right? Like there's limits and boundaries and stuff like that. So there are the same with God. There are boundaries and things that we're not supposed to do or that we are supposed to do. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to go forward and be like, this is going to be great as long as I stay in relationship. When we take our eyes off of relationship and we start getting into, oh, well, I'm a Christian or I'm a Jesus follower, so I'm not allowed to do that, or I'm not. Like, you change it. And one of the greatest gifts that could happen to me, even though I still get my feelings and want to be like all like bitter about it, is the fact that when I was going through the divorce, I had to do it alone. There was so much I had to walk alone because so many turned their back on me. It was the greatest gift that happened to me, having to do it alone. Because during that time, that was me and Jesus. That was me and Jesus. And that was what made me able to go through it, and I just sit here and think, if I had not had all of these other moments, now granted, Christy was severe, but if I had not had all of these other moments of hurts and things that I survived, who would this woman have been on February 3rd, 2019, in a hospital waiting room for the cath lab while my husband's in surgery? Because everybody else around me, and I love all the people that were with me, I had great friends and family that were there. Probably because they were having to stay distracted because, like, it was severe. They were all in conversation. I can remember my kids and my nieces and nephews eating cookies and having drinks and laughing, like keeping each other entertained, just to survive the moment. I was alone, surrounded with tons of people. I was alone, having to be in worship. Would I have been in conversation instead had I not had all these other things that I'd been through? You know what I mean? Like, I had to know him. To know that I knew, like, and I told my counselor this, I'm going to be real. Yes, clearly I was praying for my husband's life to be spared. But I was not forgetting about Connie. And I was in prayer saying, get me through the next breath, get me through the next breath. Because I needed him. I needed him to save my husband, but I needed him as well. And so I don't know. And we give up on God so easy, or we give up on religion so easy and faith and all these things, right? Because something's disappointed, because somebody lied to somebody and said, serve God and life is roses.
Yeah, not true.
And it's not true. It's the whole thing of where it's like you have to, he's a life sustainer. And so he might not have sustained Christy's life for whatever reasons, but he sustained mine and to get me here. So I tell Reed all the time, you need to thank her. You need to thank her.
And as you're talking, it sounds like both those situations. I mean, what you walked through with Christy, you know, even the healing from that years later, you and your relationship with God, and then going through the divorce and having and being alone and just you and God. I mean, I feel like that prepared you for what you just described. You went through, you know, that first night and on in the hospital. That yes, all those people were there, but you didn't fall apart, and you didn't need them. You needed them.
I needed them, but yes.
You know what I'm saying? You needed them. It's not that you didn't need them, but in that moment, there was this deep, abiding faith, rocks of remembrance, things that happened before that built your faith to the point where you could stand, and you knew who your God was, and you knew what he was capable of, and you knew what you needed, and that was him, you know.
And you, my dear, you know who your God is. And you know what you need, and you know what he's capable of.
It's, gosh, stop it, I don't want to cry. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, because I do think that's key. When you talked about, you know, how we need physical touch, you know, and just reaching out and touching Reed. And I think those, you know, my soul longs, and those times that we've had with the Lord. And sometimes, like, that's why I wrote one of my thankful post recently, was just about being back in church, because I missed so much church between being sick and yes, I love to worship God in my own time too, but there was just something about the corporate
yes
that, you know, just fed my soul.
We need each other though,
and that fed my soul, and was a touch from the Lord. And we talk about the, you know, feeling the touch of the Lord, and that's how I equate it. Touch of the Holy Spirit, touch of the Lord, whatever it is, whether he speaks to me.
I call them love notes.
Yeah. And we need those touches, significant touches. And there's a study out there that from a physical standpoint, you know, everybody needs to have a touch. So in order to be fully healthy, for our endorphins to be released, for our health to be optimal, we need 8 significant touches a day. Does everybody get that? No. It's whether it's a hug or it's a touch, holding your hand, or a kiss on the cheek, whatever. It's a significant touch. And I'm a touchy-feely person, and I like to be touched, and I've had to really rely on the Lord for now. But I remember come to the place where I recognize that while that's important, walking in obedience with the Lord is even more important, and sometimes that's making some really hard choices, and knowing that you're going to be without those things like physical touch and the companionship and being alone and in solitude. But then that's an opportunity for God to show up. And for him to meet those needs instead of us looking to for somebody else. And so that's what my soul longs for, is more of him. And so that's where I'm at.
In all things, with 100% honesty, I can say, and you're in the midst of it, of a lot still, but I know that you've been to the other side of other things, so you probably would understand this and agree. You've actually already said it. I would do it all over again. I would, knowing the loss, knowing the hurt, knowing the betrayal, knowing the fear, I would do it all over again, because I love where I am. I'm at a place of, I'm okay. I love me. I really actually like me. And in so many years of my life, and especially in my old life being married, I constantly was twisting myself, trying to be different. Taking all the classes I could at church, reading all the different books, trying to be something that I wasn't, because I always felt like I was too much or not enough, right? So you're always just striving to be different. And now I'm just okay with me. I literally am so okay with me. And I would do it all again.
It's funny you say that because even when I went through my first divorce, and I went through Healing the Wounded Woman, and it was, what I really needed, and it was a God thing. And then, of course, I went on to bring it to our church and to lead it myself. But even the things I learned in there, and just like I said earlier, I tell people you have a choice when God calls you to something, and it's a risk, and you step out in faith, and you can either be obedient or not. God's not going to turn his back on you.
Right,
but you just may be missing out on something.
Right.
And even though I knew that, and even though I even walked that through myself, my heart, my desire was, I just want to be married again. I just want to be married again. Because my life will be normal if I get married again. I mean, I got married at 19. I went through a divorce at 37, And so all I knew was being married. And I could just be married again, then my life would be normal. And I also wanted more children. I rushed into a relationship too soon. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we teach in Healing the Wounded Woman is the more healing you have and the healthier you are, then that's the healthiness in somebody else you will attract.
Right.
The more wounded you are, you're going to attract their woundedness.
Yeah.
And so my woundedness attracted his woundedness. And again, I chose not to listen to God because God warned me. I didn't feel right that this wasn't right. I had warnings, but I wanted so bad. I dismissed those. That's not God. I'm not hearing God, and I chose, and I saw warning signs, and I chose to ignore them, rationalizing them away, because I just wanted to be married again. And so that was also a choice that I made, knowing that God, and did God turn his back on me? No. God, I think in his love for me and knowing the desire of my heart to have another child, gave that to me. In the midst of me saying, I made a mistake, we're done, now I'm pregnant. God, how is this? You're a sovereign God. How is this a good thing? But it is what kept us together. And we did go to counseling, and we were separated for the first trimester. But it was a very good thing we went through and gave us some tools and to rebuild the little bit of the foundation we had already. And again, lots of issues and things over the last 12 or 13 years that just compiled, and ups and downs, and really a lot of dysfunction and things. I just felt I couldn't, it was not okay anymore. And I'd done all I can, and I felt like God had released me, like my heart had turned, but nonetheless, part of it was my own consequences for the choices I made and deciding not to listen to God. But was he there with me? Yes. Did I have a relationship with him? It wasn't like he turned his back on me and I had to, you know what I'm saying? I think that in the midst of that, God said, yeah, you made a mistake, and there's going to be consequences for the mistake that, not a mistake, the choice you made. Yes, this was not my best for you. This was not my will for you. I warned you. I tried to tell you. Now there's going to be some consequences, but I'm with you. Mm-hmm. And I never felt like I was alone in it. And when it came time for me to, just something in me turned that said, okay, no more. I know in my heart of hearts that was the Lord. That was the Holy Spirit. That's all I can explain, was years and years of me fighting for this marriage, and at the risk of losing my kids and never seeing my grandson, at the risk of losing myself, at the risk of what other people will think. It was just like something in me changed, because time and time again, I would fight for and want to solve and fix and help and, just be the one to take the brunt of everything, and if that's what it takes. And then when it just came to a point where enough is enough, and my heart just turned. And it was just a weird thing. Not that I didn't love him anymore. Not that I was turning my back on him. Not that I didn't want the marriage. It's just, I cannot do this with you anymore. Mm-hmm. These are your choices. They've affected me and my kids for too long. And I can't do it anymore with you. And that's the simplest way. I didn't know what was going to come next. Mm-hmm. I just knew that that's where I was at. And I've not wavered from that. There's not been any part of me that has been a check in my spirit, like you're making the wrong choice. I've had peace about it. Yeah. And God has, I just can know that this is where I'm I mean, this choice was also God's blessing in a way.
Don't you think you can know that it's God when you can just cry in anguish about the human side of the hurt? Mm-hmm. And the human side of us is we want to not hurt. So you know that you could take that hurt away, mostly, right? If you just change your mind. But in the agony and in the fire is when you say, God. And so you get through the next one and the next one and the next one until the end of it. And there's going to come a point where he's going to wash you complete of all of the pain and all of the tears. And you're going to not have all that extra anymore. You're still going to be alone in the sense of not having a human life partner yet. But I think it says something about the person, the character of you, that can just be crying in the sense of understanding the pain, the humanness of how much it hurts, the sadness. And even in that weakness of the pain, you've got this strength and this peace that surpasses all understanding, which is the greatness of God. That is true relationship. Too many of us, I said it at small group Tuesday night, I didn't want to have my mom's relationship, my mom's religion, my grandma's religion, what I was raised in. I had to find my own. We were talking about maturity and immaturity of Christians. How can you tell? And I said, I don't think it's about age, and I don't think it's about how long you've attended somewhere. Bible says we are known by our fruits. And I think that when you can see somebody, because we're always growing in something, we better be, or else we're doing it wrong. Just like somebody says, how long does grief last? Grief lasts a lifetime. Because you can only grieve so much. You don't know everything there is to grieve. And life happens, and then you realize more. It's just like God takes us through stuff, and he gives us, he feeds us and shows us and teaches us everything we need to know in that moment. And when we've learned it and mastered it and overcome it, he pulls the curtain back a little bit more. And now there's more. And we've got to learn it and master it. But it's also in growing deeper with him, too, that we master things, and then when we get there, that's how you know maturity versus immaturity. So great maturity and in your faith or in your relationship with Jesus says, I'm going to bawl my freaking eyes out right now because this hurts like hell. This hurts. But I know that as I'm drawing breath and to cry out saying how bad this hurts, that you are still God. And you're going to sustain me and see me on the other side of it. That's how you know maturity. I'm going to sit here in the fire because I know that you're with me, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do the work, and I'm going to get up, and I'm going to feed myself tomorrow, and I'm going to cry out to you again on how much this hurts. And I know that you're going to comfort me when I lay my head down to sleep. And I'm going to get up tomorrow, and I'm going to cry out to you because this hurts. But you're going to comfort me tomorrow when I lay my head down to sleep. And that's maturity. And I think of back to this whole thing of Rhonda. I don't know what I'm supposed to talk to you about because I thought it was this. But I think to the memories that he kept flashing to me of you. So the first one, I was 21. The next one, I don't even know. I think it was like 7 or 8 years into our marriage when we did Healing the Wounded Woman. So like 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Just an FYI, like there's been crap. Both of us have walked through some crap.
Yeah.
There's been some hurt. But you're still that vision of a person that I see that when there's something heavy, of just that woman that's of strength and encouragement, of holding on to something. So you still show that. You still reflect that in all things. And I know that there's another side of this. I know there's another side of it. But now I understand why he flipped the switch on me or flipped the script on me. Like, yeah. I literally thought it was supposed to be something totally different. Upbeat, even. And I didn't understand. But now I get it.